Hello everybody, welcome back to The Artist Theology, a quick simple dive into the relationship between art and the Christian faith. My name is Nikki and I am an author. Oh my goodness, I am an author. That was the first thing I ever wanted to be. Just a heads up, I'm probably not going to over-edit this one. There might be a bit of background noise, that kind of thing, but I just wanted to come on and talk to you about this book. I wrote a memoir. Isn't that so wild? So today we're going to talk about the memoir, why I wrote it, my experience writing it, and how my relationship with God has changed in the process. So essentially, how art can draw us closer to the one who made us. So let's go. A bit of a backstory around what this memoir is about. Growing up, I suffered with eating disorders. I suffered with non-purging bulimia for a while, and then purging bulimia, and then just like a few different disordered eating tendencies and eating disorders that weren't quite categorized into something, but I just didn't even know I had an eating disorder, but I was just enacting these behaviors. And through a very miraculous journey in which God healed me and I prayed to God and he showed me how to eat and how to eat the correct amount for my body and how to view myself through a lens of love rather than hate, I was able to be healed from this. Not only was I healed from bulimia, but I was also healed from self-harm, from depression, suicidal ideation, all of these things. So yeah, God has been so faithful, and my story was very miraculous. There we go. That's what I was trying to say, because I couldn't afford treatment. I didn't have access to treatment for a very long time. And so I really just had to rely on God, and he came through and just in a very miraculous way. And so God told me to write this book. And at first I was a bit like, oh my gosh, that's a big task, but I was very excited by it. Writing a book about those experiences wasn't something I ever thought that I would be able to do, primarily because at one point it wasn't something I ever thought I would be able to come to the other side of. In a way, I always thought that I would have the eating disorder, and in a way, people kind of told me that. They said, try and control it, but you'll always struggle with it. But, we thank Jesus because that has not been the case at all. And Jesus is sovereign over every single eating disorder and mental illness. And so God said, write your book, write your testimony. And I had to obey. So I answered the call. I think I answered the call probably 2017 or 2018 to write this book. And obviously it is 2024 now, so it took me quite a long time. So I thought I'd just talk through the process of writing this book and what that's been like. So the first draft was 29,359 words, and I sent it to my friend in July 2019. So if you know anything about books, 29,000 words is not a lot. It would be, considered a novella length. It would have been very, very short. And I thought it was done. I had written a series of thoughts and personal essays talking about eating disorders and God's goodness, summarizing my story from beginning to end. And looking back on it, what I had achieved was a bare bones outline of what would become the full book. But I didn't know that at the time. At this point, the book had a title called Vessel, so that is not what the book is called now. I'm going to tell you more, obviously, about what the book is called and where you can get it and all of that, so stay tuned. But yeah, so it had an initial different title. I got the feedback from my friend, and it was really helpful. I was really interested to see how it would land with other Christians, since I come from a specific Christian context and there are obviously different denominations and that sort of thing. And my friend's thoughts helped me to understand what I might clarify further, even if I disagreed with some of her statements. And she also asked for clarifications on a few statements and advised on tone and phrasing so it wouldn't ostracize non-Christians. Because even though this is a Christian memoir, I wanted to be open to people from all different backgrounds. So I wanted to make sure I was using terminology that made sense to people. My step 2 was to actually go back and read some memoirs. So after I'd finished this draft, I think I just sat it down for a while, and in that time I read some memoirs. Research is so important, and I actually hadn't read that many memoirs. And so through this, I learned the meaning of creative nonfiction, which is what a memoir is. Prior to this, I had mostly read fiction or just straight up nonfiction. not so much a melding of the two. Creative nonfiction is such a gorgeous genre, and through reading these memoirs, I learned that I had to make my story more immersive. So I'm going to read you some example sentences from the book. The first one will be what I wrote in the first draft that was not very good at all, and the second one will be how I made it more creative nonfiction. So you tell me what the difference is. Okay, so this is the first one. At my secondary school, we had a school nurse. She would come in every week and was there to discuss anything on your mind, from periods to relationships to family life. So said the posters stuck up on the school walls. She felt like something of a myth. I had never seen the school nurse and didn't know of anybody who went to see her. I am convinced now that she had more visitors than I thought at the time, but people were afraid to talk about visiting her. There was a sort of stigma attached to visiting the school nurse, some strange, quite frankly stupid and unjustifiable unspoken agreement that seeing her was uncool. If you're in school now, or in fact any stage of your life, know this. Many things considered uncool when you're younger are invariably cooler once you're older. That and more expensive. So get all the free help whilst you can. Then we'll skip a little bit to one day I darted into the school nurse office. It was, I thought, in a perpetually embarrassing location, squeezed into a tiny corridor right outside of my old head of year's office. So that's an example of what the first draft would have been like, and through reading the memoirs, I learned I had to make it more immersive. So here's an example of a style that fits a memoir better. Sixth form, 17 years old, 2 years later. The poster looks like it was drawn by a kid in year 8. It's a smiling nurse's head floating in the middle of the page, surrounded by the words sexual health, emotional health, physical health, concerns, here to talk, drawn in multicolored marker pen. According to the poster, the school nurse is available to talk every Thursday, and her room is situated beside our head of year's office. I've seen this poster several times, and it's never crossed my mind to speak to the school nurse. It doesn't seem like a cool thing to do. What would my friends think if they found out? And then we'll skip a little bit. I dart into the school nurse's office when no one's around, moving quickly to avoid being seen by our head of year, or worse, another student. I knock doubtfully. The posters have been up for months, perhaps years. Maybe there is no school nurse. Come in. Nervous, but knowing I can't back out now, I turn the door handle and pop my head around the door. Okay, so that's your second example. So the second example is in present tense. You're in my head as I was at 17 years old. The first one is written as my adult self looking back, and it's very much a summarizing, more telling rather than showing, essentially. So that's kind of what I did in this step 2. Step 3 was just a long series of editing. As I said, I started this book probably 2017. It's 2024. I've been editing for so long, and I did several edits by myself, but then I had a developmental editor, a line editor, and a proofreader, alongside doing my own proofreads and my own line edits and my own developmental edits, of course. So it was pretty intense. Now, God is so good because I actually got my developmental editor for free, and that was something that was such a God thing. I'd almost kind of given up on writing a book. I was so tired and it was taking so long, and I remember lying down one day and God was reminding me, like, hey, I gave you this book to write, because I was asking God, like, oh, what should I do? What should I focus on now? And God was like, hey, what's in your hand? Like, what have I already told you to do that you can revisit? And I remember this memoir, and I prayed in my head. I said, God, please help me to edit this memoir, because I needed an editor and it was going to be quite pricey. And immediately God was like, brought to mind someone to my head who I'd watched the day before on YouTube, and she was talking about launching her editing services, and she was going to provide an edit for free for someone, for literally, I think, just 1 or 2 people. And weirdly enough, I hadn't thought anything of it when I'd watched that video. It was just, I watch a lot of writers on YouTube, so I didn't really think anything of it. And then literally that day, immediately God was like, hey, remember what you saw yesterday? And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, just yesterday, someone was giving out free edits. So I reached out to her and I really prayed. I was like, God, if this is, for me, please let her agree to edit my book. She's quite a big channel, so I thought there would be lots of writers reaching out to her. My book is more of a memoir. It's from a Christian perspective. Like, I just thought, that might not be the first thing she wants to read, but she was so excited and said yes. And so I got my developmental edits for free. And just a huge thank you to Kelly Tai. If you want to check out her services, The company is called Bramble and Crow Books. So I can link that down below. And she also has a YouTube channel called Kelly Ty. So that was fantastic. And then line editor, praise God again. I actually got that at a sort of a more affordable price point because it was somebody who hadn't really edited so many books before. It was somebody I knew from university to be an incredible writer, and I really wanted to work with her. And she was also from a Christian background, which was helpful. So my developmental editor wasn't, my line editor was, and it was just useful to have different perspectives. Then there was my proofreader, and my proofreader was my good friend, and she edited that for me as well. So again, that was for free, which was beautiful. And then my friend also edited the book cover, a different friend, and that was just so stunning. And it's been a really beautiful journey of learning how to design a cover. And I've got a whole video of that on my YouTube channel if you're interested in watching that. And then the formatter was another miraculous experience. And I think what has shown me that God is the one behind this book is how miraculous things have just been. Genuinely, like, I had no money to pay for this formatter, and then suddenly the next day, like £790 just dropped in my account from nowhere. I was literally like, what? I was so confused. I didn't know where it had come from. I thought this company had mispaid me. I didn't know what they were paying me for. I hadn't worked for them that month, and it turned out to be holiday pay, and it came literally the day after I was praying for money to pay my formatter, and it was more than enough to pay the formatter, and we got that done. Now, step 4, and obviously I'm truncating this because, as I said, it took many years, but step 4 was more the marketing phase. So, for example, recording this podcast episode, getting ARC readers, which is an advanced reader copy, people who read the book ahead of it being released so that they can help you publicize the book, and finding different ways to publicly, market the book, essentially. And this has also just been such a beautiful experience. And so I just wanted to touch on how my relationship with God has adapted, grown, changed, been shaped by the writing of this book, because it really does feel like a collaboration and a co-collaboration, a co-writing of this book. So number 1, I would say, is listening to write the book in the first place. I mean, this book wouldn't exist if God hadn't told me to write it, full stop. This book wouldn't exist if God hadn't healed me, to be perfectly honest. There was nothing I wanted to do less than speak about my experiences with an eating disorder. I used to be so ashamed. I used to be in so much pain. I used to really have no hope. And so, if someone had told me when I was suffering, one day you'll write about this, I would have genuinely, I don't mean this slightly, I would have laughed in their face, because I did not think I was ever coming out of it, and I was so ashamed of it. Honestly, I couldn't ever think about showing that side of myself to what? I just couldn't think about sharing that with anyone, because I really hated the fact that I was going through it. So I think listening to writing the book, being healed in the first place, has all just grown my trust in God. And then when it comes to the actual writing, I would pray to sit down to write. I would pray when I was editing. I would hear direction. I'd be led to people and places that would inspire my faith. I have such faith that God wanted this book to be out, because I received instructions, I got free edits, I got help writing it, so many things aligned. And what was so interesting was that, I'm a writer, and I've been writing for a very long time, and I back up my projects and all of that. None of that is new. And yet, when I started at first sitting down to write this book, every time I reopened my document, hundreds of words, if not thousands, would be missing. And it was like something was deliberately attacking this work. It was weird. No other project was that happening with, but something was happening where this book was just being deleted. It was crazy. And I remember one day just walking along and just wondering to myself, that's so weird that this keeps happening to this book. Why does it feel like this book is consistently under attack? What's going on? I make loads of progress, and then by the time I reopen it, all that progress is gone, and then it's demotivated me from picking up and continuing it. And oh my gosh. And I literally heard these words just drop into my heart. It was God's voice just immediately just dropped into me. The devil is scared. That was it, just those 4 words. Now, if you're a Christian, if you've heard God speak to you, I don't know, maybe it's different for lots of different people, but I think some people experience it the same. And for me, a lot of the time, it's just this still voice of authority that drops into the very center of my being. And it was just, the devil is scared. I was like, what? And then it suddenly made sense to me. I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, if this book is powerful, if God has commissioned this book, right? If this book is written with the aim to, you know, let people see that they can be set free from an eating disorder by turning to God, then of course the devil is scared, because the devil doesn't want anyone to be free. And so this message of help and healing is the exact opposite of what the kingdom of darkness wants. And so it makes sense that this book is under attack. And after I prayed about that, that never happened again. Like the book, I never lost a bunch of words again. It was after that realization. It was so interesting. And so that was another way that I thought, okay, God really wants me to write this book. And so it's taught me a lot about purpose, in terms of the purpose of perhaps writing something, in that God can really call you to write something, and completing that work until it's done, even if it takes many years, is worth it and is honoring and being obedient to that call that He's placed upon you. And I'm so glad that I have, and I'm so glad that it's out, and it's been really incredible to see how God has really held and shaped this book throughout. So the title is "And the Truth Shall Set You Free," and it has a subheading which is "Hope and Healing from Bulimia." I will link it down below. I hope you enjoy reading it. It's been like a huge journey. Sometimes it's been very difficult to write. Sometimes it's been very joyful. It's been a mix, honestly. If I'm honest, it's been a mix, but I'm really happy that I've written it, and I've learned so much about writing throughout this process. And it's my first self-published book, so I've learned a lot about the self-publishing process. I've made friends in the process. I do have to say a huge shout out to my YouTube friends, because they have stuck with me on this journey probably more than a lot of other people, because I haven't spoken so much about it in my day-to-day life, but I've spoken about it online. And so huge thank you to my YouTube friends. You know who you are. And yeah, so I really pray that you will pick up a copy of the book. As I said, it's talking about God's goodness and sovereignty over mental health. And so if there's anybody you know who is struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating or depression, I talk about depression as well, for example, but I would say mainly the book is centered around bulimia. Definitely pick it up for them. Just pray, have a pray. See if God places it on your heart to get this book for them or for yourself. You know, just always pray and have discernment and read at your own pace, because obviously there are some trigger warnings associated with this book, and it is a heavy topic. I would say it's an uplifting book towards the end. I'm really taking you on a journey towards light and joy. But definitely pray with discernment ahead of purchasing a copy as well. But yeah, so I pray that you will get a copy. I pray that you'll share it with people. If you could share on social media as well, I would very much appreciate it. And if you do read it, please leave a star rating on Amazon. It just means that more people can have access to the book and, you know, prayerfully to healing as well. So that's my heart. And, you know, if you're someone who works with young people in like a church setting or a community center setting or youth group, whatever that is, I just think, you know, especially young women need the story of positive body image and how to view themselves through the lens of love. But it's not just women. I think genuinely, yes, I'm writing this to my younger self, but honestly, there needs to be more representation for men as well with eating disorders. So yeah, definitely check the book out. I'll have it linked down below. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm so excited and so grateful again to God that this is release day and I am officially an author. Wow. God is good. Thank you so much for listening, and I will speak with you on the next episode. Bye.